standards. Anyway, when I looked down at my body and they were working on it in the ER room, what I looked at, I didn't look like I was breathing. I didn't look like I had life in me.
So you're in the hospital room now, and you're out of your body, looking at your lifeless body, or what seemed a lifeless body there, and Chuck, the other pilot, is sharing a room with a curtain?
Yeah, I actually wasn't thinking about Chuck. After we got out of the hospital, I was pretty well focused on yours truly, and I didn't even see Chuck come in or whatever. And so I was looking really at myself and focusing on my body and what I was experiencing. And I really was saying things like this, man, that looks like I'm dead, but that can't be. I mean, it looks like I'm dead. That's clearly my body. But I'm up here, and I've never felt more alive. And I was not really worried. I wasn't panicking or anything like I said earlier. But something began to happen, a commotion in the other room. And when I say room, I'm talking probably, I don't know, 15 feet away, 20 feet away. But there was a curtain, a thick gray curtain had separated, so I could not see over. And there was clearly this commotion going on. And strangely, this commotion really grabbed at my heart. Now, I'm focused on myself and what's going on. But for some reason, Pastor John, I feel like if I had a heart in my chest at that moment, in my spiritual chest, someone had grabbed that heart and just squeezed it and was trying to just hurt my heart in a way that would be completely fatal. And because it felt like this, but obviously my body is down there, my heart is down there. It seemed like it was not beating, but I had just this horrid sensation.
That just came over you.
Yes. And it was involving me, but it was not happening to me. Something was happening, and began to recognize that it's coming from just a few feet away in that same room. And there were spiritual forces going on. Pastor John, nowadays people hear about spiritual forces. I never heard of spiritual forces. There were no movies out like that. I was not a Sunday school kid. I didn't know any about this stuff. And yet I sensed spiritual forces going on, and this was evil. This was evil spiritual forces. It even seemed like someone had grabbed the power, the electrical power of the hospital, and was starting to turn the power switch on and off, on and off, on and off. And then it just started being drained, like a rheostat switch had been turned way down, and it was just sucking the power out of the hospital. And this all happened in a short period of time, but long enough to process that something spiritual is happening and something horrible is happening, way worse than death. Death is bad. Unless you're going to heaven, then it's not that bad at all. In fact, you think about it, it's wonderful. But death and hell is what this was about. Someone's spiritual destination was at stake, and the decision I knew had already been made. This wasn't a decide yes, no, maybe. This decision was over. This was judgment time. And I'm sitting there thinking about my body, thinking about what I'm going through right now, but all of my attention is over here, watching something that I can't even explain. What I am positive of is that my flight instructor, my mentor, died that day. I think he died twice. I think he died at the monument, at the crash site. I think then there was life in him, and then they tried to resuscitate him, and then he died again. And when I talked to my Dr. Homer Graham about this months later, almost a year later, he verified, because I pinpointed and asked him, you got to tell me about that guy that you worked on. What guy? The guy that you worked on the day. No, I didn't work on anybody, just you, Dale. Somebody worked on that would be, well, then who was it? And he began to explain to me that Chuck and I were put in the same emergency room, explained the whole thing. And then I realized that my my flight instructor had been taken to hell.
How did you know that?
I knew it in my heart, and when I woke up from the coma 4 days later, I could not deal with it. I couldn't deal with it. It took me, did I know it was there? Yes, push it down. Just push it down. Push it down. I couldn't deal with it because there was too much on the other side of the coin. That was indeed horrid, and it was bad, but I was blamed for this airplane crash for a long time. I had to deal with that. I was told I'm never going to walk again. I looked like Frankenstein.
So back to that day, you're in the emergency room, you're watching your resuscitation attempts. What happened after that?
After the heaviness of what occurred in the emergency room that I knew was Chuck, that it began to leave, and then I went back to my body, and I began to question again why I'm here. But I felt like I needed new air, new blood or something, because I had been so drained by this experience.
So you're going in and out of consciousness or in and out of your body?
No, I was out of my body the whole time. Once I was in the emergency room, I was out of my body the whole time. But what happened, this is kind of important. If I don't tell it, it would not give the story justice. I was looking at my body again, and a image came that occurred, and it happened in my life. It's strange, but I saw an image that flashed into my mind, and it was like a little YouTube video being played for me, and I was 11 years old, and I was kneeling at a church summer camp in Southern California, a place called Cedar Crest, and I had asked God to forgive me of my sins. I had invited Jesus into my heart as a little kid, and man, I was sincere about that decision, and I remembered it, and I looked at myself in a sense and go, wow, man, I was genuine. I was sincere. I really believed in God. I really believed that Jesus was the Son of God, and He is. And I invited Him into my life and into my heart. And
are you experiencing this like as a review of your life, or is it just that particular scene?
In this case, it was one scene, and that was the scene. There were no other scenes at that time. Nothing else happened. But boy, was it revealing, because I realized that I was no longer that tender-hearted kid, and I had become so selfish and so self-absorbed, and I felt horrible, ashamed that my life had come to this. And I was actually thinking at the moment, gosh, I'm so young to have died at 19, and look what has happened. Oh my, this is just too bad. But, well, okay, but gosh, cut down early in life, selfish, self-absorbed. And then all of a sudden, the guilt, the shame that I was feeling started to disappear. I started feeling lighter, and I started moving out of the room backwards, still looking forwards, but moving out backward. I started moving just very rapidly out of the hospital, out of the atmosphere, and started moving into.
So you leave your body, or your spiritual body leaves the hospital. You're still seeing the environments of Earth?
Yeah, I'm looking at Earth because I'm seeing the hospital, the room, and then almost like taking off in a rocket ship, and you're sitting on the nose of the rocket. And I do remember seeing just lights, lots of little spheres of light. I could not determine the size, but thousands, and then perhaps hundreds of thousands, and then millions. And
is it darkness? Is it light? Is it?
Everything was dark except for those spheres of light, and this giant, not giant, but intensely bright beam of light that protruded from me forward. As if the light was originating from me, not that the light was originating from somewhere else. I wasn't following some ray beam.
So let's talk about what you saw as you are going through this black path of light in the midst of blackness.
Right, and this large beam of light moving forward, lots of light spheres coming in the other direction. And I began to realize these are not planets, these aren't suns, these are angelic beings, and they're going where I just came from. And they were going, toward Earth as I was going away from Earth. Of course, I still didn't know where I was going, but I realized these were angelic beings.
How did you know that?
I knew it in my heart.
So there's a way of knowing that.
Yeah, I began to realize that this is the way it's done. This is how it's done, is that I would have a question and the answer would come right through my heart. Interesting, I took my mind with me, but not my brain. My brain's back on Earth, but I still have a mind.
So what are you moving toward?
I'm moving toward an incredible, I began to see a small, bright, brilliant glow that got bigger and bigger and bigger. In the center of the glow was the most intense, bright, white light, but that's earthly words, hard to put that into a better term, but my eyes were obviously completely enhanced, completely strengthened. I must have had, my eyes couldn't have been human. I couldn't see all of this. With the brightness of the light would be so bright that it would burn and destroy a human eye, and yet the light, as bright as it was, made me only want to look more into it. And I knew that the white was God. He was the source. I wasn't looking at some ray beam or some sun. I was looking at God, the source, and this light. The light is not God. The light is what emanates from God.
So you could see not just a light in the middle of this darkness, but there was a city as well?
Yeah, because I was moving toward it, and I got, closer and closer to it. And as I got closer to it, I began to, this pilot talk here, and maybe God did this for me, but man, I've flown a lot. Even at that age, I'd flown around the world quite a bit as a passenger, a little bit as a pilot. Nowadays, I've flown over the biggest cities in the world, and I remember what it's like to come into Paris at night, or Moscow, or you name it. Any city that you can name, I've probably flown in there that day or night, and nothing was like, heaven city was nothing like that.
Where is this heavenly city that you're flying as your own person into? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm going to the city of gold, which was obviously heaven and holy. Holiness prevailed everywhere. I didn't know what that word meant before this experience. I didn't even know what holiness was, but I knew that this was holy. And this holiness prevailed here, and I knew this was where God reigned. I knew I was coming into heaven.
So in your book, you describe flying into, is it the New Jerusalem? What is it? And describe the beauty and what you saw.
I'm moving into what I would have to just say, the holy city of God. You're a Bible scholar more than I am, but the holy city of God, this is where God reigns, that I know. And the city is golden. And now I'm flying like an airplane, coming in, slowing down, descending, slowing down, descending. And I get this incredible airborne view, a descending, slowing down airborne view of the city of gold. And it's a city that's walled. The greens were greener, the yellows, the golds, the blues, everything. reminded me that earth is a reflection of heaven, but heaven is perfection. Earth is close to that in the natural realm, but it's also a fallen world. So I realized that earth was a reflection, but here is perfection.
So are you seeing earth-like things?
Yes.
Or what did you see?
Absolutely, earth-like things in every regard. For some reason, the grass took the wind out of my lungs. First, I just looked at the grass and I couldn't believe it. It was wild grass, but it looked manicured like velvet. Rich, thick, nothing out of place, not a blade, but nobody was trimming it. No one had trimmed it. No one had to garden it. It was perfect grass, and I don't know why that stuck with me. But yeah, I was changed by that. The trees, there's life in the trees and the flowers. There's life. It doesn't give it justice.
So there are flowers, there are trees, there's grass, but it's the same but different?
It's the same. On earth, I think if you were to look at a color chart and say, oh, okay, this is red. And then, oh, okay, this turns to blue. Oh, this is yellow. Okay, you look at a color chart and you take that same chart and you say, okay, in heaven, let's look at red. Oh, there's 2,000-3,000 shades of red, and I can see them all. So it's
wow.
completely different, you know.
Yeah.
And then,
so you're experiencing the same thing, but in a much richer, deeper experience.
And then you try to describe music that way.
What about like mountains or streams, or do you see any of that?
Yes. Over the city were majestic mountains that were as gorgeous as any that could be ever seen. However, they did not look that different than Earth. I wasn't disappointed by that. I'm not saying that. I noticed snow. So think about that. Snow. What does that mean? Atmosphere? Temperature? Snow? What's that all about? I noticed flying birds later. What does that mean? These are the kind of questions I ask.
Yeah.
Okay, if a bird is to fly, it can't be a vacuum. I'm hearing music. What does that mean? Music can't transfer in a vacuum. It has to be in an atmosphere. There's atmosphere here in heaven. Oh, what does that mean?
And you're flying, but you don't have wings.
Right. I'm floating is what I would call it. I'm floating and coming in, descending. And finally, I come down and touch ground level for a while, and I'm hovering between 40 feet-ish and down. But I recognize later, oh, there was gravity there. There is gravity. There is atmosphere. There's water. There are animals. So, oh, yeah. Oh, see, it all makes sense now. But at that time, I had lots of questions. But each time I had a question, I would get a thought as if somebody had planted the answer into your heart. You know, that's hard to describe.
No, I understand.
But the physical heart is back on earth, and the spiritual heart is my spirit. And I've learned this later. I am a spirit. And so the communication was so awesome because you could not miscommunicate to someone. You always knew the motive of the question or the answer or the comment. The motive was always out in the open and pure.
Did you see Jesus?
Later, I did. That was the last thing that happened after going through the city and asking questions and going through at the very last moment. I had been ushered closer and closer toward the light, toward the light, toward the light.
The light that's in the center of the city?
Yeah, and then there was a stairway that was near the glass sea, which it looked like a sea, and a stairway that went up, and a large angel with the most power, if we would say that. And it was clear that he was basically in charge of that stairway. And I just began to communicate to this angel heart to heart. Again, it's hard to say, did we talk? It seemed like it, but then it seemed like we didn't. This communication was just impeccably pure. And I began to recognize I can't go up there. I can't go up. I can't go up and still go back. And I was thinking, go back? Go back? What do we mean? What's that mean? And as soon as I'm thinking, go back, the angel moved just to the side. But I looked into the eyes of the warmest, kindest, most wonderful. I knew this was the Son of God. I knew this was my Savior. And all of a sudden my knees buckled, my legs lost their strength, and I just went down. I couldn't stand. I was not worthy to stand in His presence. Funny that I didn't feel worthy to be in heaven, yet I knew I was worthy in the early part. I was somehow granted this authority, but I had this supernatural gift that I was worthy. Somebody had done something for me.
He had.
Yes. And so I'm down on just falling down, and I see His feet, and I grab them, and I hold His feet, and I see the scars. And I know this is the Son of God. He's my Savior. He's my Lord. It is because of Him. He died for everybody. It's so cool because the Bible even says, no, I take that back. Jesus said that I have come not to condemn the world, but that the world through me will be saved. And it was because of that. He's not condemning anybody. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life, what sins you've done, including murder. It doesn't matter what you've done. All of it is forgivable. God can forgive anybody of anything. And then we have this free gift that we call salvation. You and I know about.
And that's what you felt at His feet.
Of course. But to describe this experience, I just stopped at His feet and I was worshiping Him down on the ground there. And I heard the voice, Dale, do you love me? That's it. Do you love me? And I'm trying to think of all these words to say. And I'm getting ready to say, in a sense, I'm getting ready to say, but I've said nothing. And I'm getting ready to say, of course I love you, Lord. I remember who you are and what you do. I'm getting ready to say that. And He bends down and whispers into my ear. And I'm now back.